Hello, and welcome to the Embarcadero University course, Data Modeling with ER Studio. In this session, we'll focus on logical and physical modeling. We'll discuss how to establish relationships between entities, how to create and work with submodels to manage large models and effectively organize groups of entities together. We'll talk about generating physical models from a logical model and the settings that you can choose there. We'll go through the denormalization of the physical model. And lastly, we'll discuss the where used technology that will show logical to physical mappings, including the denormalized objects, as well as the submodel usage so you can see exactly where a particular entity lives across a logical or a physical model. Alright, let's start this session by talking about establishing relationships between entities. And say in this particular model we found out that we want to have more than one telephone number for each client. So what we can do is drop down a new entity here. We'll provide a name, so we'll give this client phone. And then what we'll do here is use the little hand icon to move that current phone number over to this client phone entity. And now what we want to do is decide what type of relationship we want between these two entities. In this case, we may want an identifying relationship, but up on this object toolbar, we have a number of different types. So we have one-to-one, non-identifying optional, non-identifying mandatory, and then identifying. So if we select this one, I can simply click once on the parent, once on the child, and you'll see it'll migrate the primary key into the primary key of the client phone. If we want to change this to non-identifying, I can just simply double-click, go to the properties, and then you'll see the options here to switch the current relationship. We can also set the cardinality to other options here as well. And you'll notice that we have a series of tabs here to document any other properties that we have for a particular relationship. So we have the phrases, that would be the verb phrase and the inverse verb phrase. The name, and you can apply both a business or a constraint name. The trigger options, definition, note, and then you can even edit the role names right here in the editor for this particular relationship. And a lot of these you'll have to go up to the display options here to see what you can actually display. But there's a number of options there. Okay, let's move on to creating and working with submodels. So say we have this particular client submodel, and we want to break this down even further. Now this model isn't particularly large, but in a very large data model, you may have hierarchies of submodels that you want to set up, and that's perfectly supported by ER Studio Data Architect. So here we're in an existing submodel. You can see that bold client submodel over here on the left. And what I can do is just simply select any number of objects here in this particular submodel, and then right-click and select Create Submodel. Now in this case, we'll call this Client Transaction and hit OK. So now you'll see that just those three objects were added to this particular submodel. What I can do is go back and right-click on the Client Transaction submodel, and if I go to the Edit, then we're given even more options here. So say we forgot something that might have been related to client that we wanted in this particular submodel. I can just select that over on the left. We'll hit Select Related, maybe we can choose the parent and children, hit OK, and then you'll see here that it's going to add client phone and broker to me. Now I can hit OK, and you'll notice here that those were added there. And don't worry about things being crisscrossed here or anything like that. We can just simply use one of our layouts and it'll lay it out for us. Additionally, if you see that some text here is truncated, a lot of times we preserve the actual size when you're changing the display settings so that the relationships don't become distorted. But I can simply just right click, resize, and it will automatically resize to fit the text. You can incidentally select multiple entities and do that as well. Now, another trick that you can use for submodels is the ability to actually hide and display specific attributes. So I can just simply right click and we'll go back to the Edit Submodel menu, and then I can go to this Attributes menu. And what this allows me to do is pick and choose for each entity which attributes I want displayed. So in this case, if there were some down below here that I didn't want to display, I can just uncheck those. We can do the same here for broker, and then I can hit OK. And you'll notice that there were some that were automatically removed from the display. And again, I can just simply right click. Again, this client is fixed because I've set that to a specific size, and we've preserved that, even if we've changed the display. So I can just hit resize. Now you notice it's not particularly obvious which entities have attributes hidden and which don't. In that case, I can go back to my display options, and we'll go to the diagram object display options here. Under the entity tab, you'll see we can say hidden attributes marker. So if we just check that and hit OK, you'll notice now that we have these little elliptical display icons that show that there's more there, that there's something hidden. Now, what you can also do is if we decided that this client transaction, we actually didn't want it nested under client here, we can actually just grab that and move it right up to the logical model for me. Oops, excuse me, we want to move that up actually to the main model. And then we'll get a option here. This will just, you can actually turn this off, but it just asks you if you really want to move that submodel. You can hit yes, and then you'll see here that client transaction is actually at the same level as client. And we can actually just move that right back for us. And you'll see that it's nested underneath. So you can really effectively use these submodels to highly organize very large models, build a hierarchy of nested submodels, and really allow yourself to navigate a large model much more easier. Okay, now let's talk about forward engineering to a physical model. And you can forward engineer the entire logical model if I just right click and generate physical model. Or, in this case, we might be managing two separate physical databases on two separate platforms with one logical model. And in that case, I may want to actually just forward engineer a section of it. And in that case, that's another great use for submodels. So what I can do is right-click on this client submodel, and we'll select Generate Physical Model. And in this case, maybe we want to go to IBM UDB 9.0. And we'll call this client underscore test. And we'll just continue to walk through the wizard. There's some options here, some defaults. So if we want every primary key clustered, I can do that. We can also generate indexes for alternate keys, inversion entries, and foreign keys. And in this case, what I can also do is actually leverage a naming standard file, and this came from the data dictionary. Well, again, we'll get into that more in depth when we go into the data dictionary session. But what I can do is actually leverage this, and it'll actually take the logical names that I have there, run them through the translation and the mapping that I have in this abbreviation file, and then use that for the physical names. So we'll hit next. We have some default storage parameters for tables and indexes, and then some summary here in terms of what we want for including the submodels, many-to-many relationships. And what we can also do is if we have custom data type mapping set up, I can select from the editor here. In this case, we just have the system mapping for UDB LUW9. So I'll hit finish, and this will actually generate that physical model. And one of the options at the beginning is actually to use the model validation to go check through some of the name lengths and that sort of thing. Those are some table checks that we can do here. We'll skip this process right now, but I'll just hit close, and then you'll see here, if we zoom in, that all of our naming logical names have been replaced with technical database names based on that abbreviation file. Okay, so now what we want to talk about is denormalizing the physical model. And in this case, say we want to roll up the client phone into the client table. And what I can do is just simply hold Control down, select both of those, and then if I right click, I'll have this option here to roll up or roll down. And notice that there's some other options here that are grayed out. The only reason for that is because based on the object selection, there's going to be some valid operations here. So in this case, I have two tables that are related by an identifying relationship, and I have the option to either roll up or roll down. If we selected just the client table, then I would be able to select from the splits. If I had two tables with the same primary key, I can opt to merge them together. So there's a number of different operations that we can do based on what is selected. In this case, again, we'll do a roll up. We'll hit next. And in this case, say we want to have 3 phone numbers, maybe a home, a business, and a mobile. So what I'll do is just select 3 here. It's actually going to take that particular phone attribute and repeat it 3 times in this roll-up process. We'll hit next, provide a name for it, and then hit finish. And you'll see here that we now have 3 phone numbers here. Now, after that denormalization has been completed, we've now changed the logical to physical mappings. And that can happen through a series of denormalization operations. If I double click and go into this client table, we'll see here that through the where used, how exactly that this particular client table still maps up to the original logical model. And you can see here that we're in the physical model here, but we'll see that it's actually what used to map to, or maps to 2 entities in logical, meaning that it used to be 2 entities. So we have a client and a client phone, and then another handy thing of the where used is this submodel usage. So if we want to see for this particular physical model what business areas that it maps up to, or however else we've organized the submodels, we'll be able to see all that here in this particular submodel usage. We can even go to the data warehouse, see that it actually doesn't exist there. We can go to the OLTP that's Oracle and see the submodel usage, as well as the physical name on the Oracle database. So you can get a lot of detailed information here through the where use. It basically keeps track of what's happened between the logical and physical as you do denormalizations. So that concludes this session of training with logical and physical modeling.